Chapter 1. Hausa Gods. The Hausa people comprise 30% of the Nigerian population, according to the Central Intelligence Agency World Factbook 2018 estimate. The Hausa people are predominantly found in northern Nigeria and adjacent southern Niger. They constitute the largest ethnic group in the area, which also contains another large group, the Fulani, perhaps one half of whom are settled among the Hausa as a ruling class, having adopted the Hausa language and culture. The language belongs to the Chadic group of the Afro-Asiatic, formerly Hamito-Semitic family, and is infused with many Arabic words as a result of Islamic influence, which spread during the latter part of the 14th century from the Kingdom of Mali, profoundly influencing Hausa belief and customs. A small minority of Hausa, known as Maguzawa or Bunjawa, remained pagan. Background. Many Nigerians identify the Hausa people as followers of Islam and Islam only, which is far from the truth, particularly once we take into account the migration theories that suggest their movement through North African countries like Egypt and even the Horn of Africa via Ethiopia. Their lack of knowledge can be attributed to the paucity of commonly available resources outside of the internet. The relatively high cost of data also acts as a deterrent to the usage of the internet, apart from the usual platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. It is unlikely that the average Nigerian will seek out information about the religious leanings of a tribe that is not their own, unless it is linked to a training course, a higher learning degree, or similar. It is now an established fact that Islam was introduced to Nigeria as far back as in the 11th century. The religion had already begun to make its way through West Africa as traders sold their wares from country to country. The Kanem-Borno Empire, circa 9th to 19th centuries, spanned the African countries of Chad, Libya, Niger, Nigeria, and the Republic of Cameroon, and formed a focal point within Nigeria for the growth of Islam, particularly within the then Emirate of Borno. As was common on trade routes at that time, Muslim merchants often chose to settle along defined trade routes, which gave their new neighbors a glimpse into their faith, resulting in waves of conversions. The May, or king, of Kanem-Borno, Ume Jilmi, is the earliest documented conversion of a traditional ruler to Islam, believed to have taken place towards the end of the 11th century, during his reign from 1085 to 1097, under the stewardship of a Muslim scholar called Muhammad ibn Mani. May Ume bin Abdel Jalil, who reigned from 1058 to 1097, died in the land of Masr or Egypt, which prompted Barth to conclude that May Ume may have intended or even accomplished a pilgrimage. This seems plausible, for the reign of this May is the accepted date for the conversion of the Seyfawa line of Kanem-Borno to Islam. The document from which this conclusion is derived is a maram issued by May Ume in favor of a certain Muhammad bin Mani. The maram alleges that Borno was the first country in the Sudan in which Islam entered, that Ibn Mani was already preaching Islam to Ume's ancestors, and that he finally summoned Borno to Islam by the grace of King Ume. A subsequent May by the name of Idris Uluma, reigned 1571 to 1603, was instrumental in deepening the entrenchment of Islam in northern Nigeria. It is reported that he was a learned and brilliant statesman, under whom the Kanem-Borno Empire achieved its greatest heights. He is credited with the introduction of wide-ranging reforms that were heavily influenced by his Islamic faith. His rule gave rise to the creation of many brick mosques, the construction of a hostel in Mecca, to be devoted exclusively to pilgrims from his empire, as well as the development of crucial legislative infrastructure. He carried out many reforms of the Borno administrative system and separated the judiciary from the main bureaucracy. He created a court of appeals to review the judgments of lower courts. He also enhanced the Islamic judicial system by appointing qualified judges to administer the law. From the 14th century onwards, Hausaland became a bastion of Islam, taking into account the two main avenues of the ongoing expansion of trade relationships with Muslim West African traders and Islamic conquests. The spread and acculturation of Islam within the 7 true Hausa states or Hausa Bakwai, Biram, Daura, Gobir, Kano, Katsina, Rano, and Zaria or Zazao, was both rapid and enduring. The Hausa Bakwai formed the basis of the Hausa kingdoms, and according to legend, they were founded by Bayajida, who came from Baghdad, Iran. Bayajida came first to Borno, where he was given one of the May's daughters as a wife, and then later lived for a while in Hausaland, where he married the Queen of Daura, who also gave him a Gwari mistress as a reward for slaying Sarki, said to be a great snake which deprived her people of access to water. By the Queen of Daura, Bayajida had a son called Bawo, another called Biram by the Borno princess, and yet another son, Karbagari, by his Gwari paramour. Bawo is said to have succeeded his father and had 6 sons who became the rulers of Daura, Katsina, Zazao, Gobir, Kano, and Rano. These, together with Biram, which was ruled by the son of Bayajida and of the Borno princess, formed the Hausa Bakwai, or the Hausa 7. However, Karbagari, the son of the Gwari mistress, had 7 sons too, who ruled Kebi, Zamfara, Gwari, Jukun or Kororofa, Ilorin, Nupe, and Yauri, which are referred to in this tradition as the Banza Bakwai, or illegitimate 7. Both the Hausa Bakwai and the Banza Bakwai were tightly enmeshed within a web of Muslim festivals, Islamic political and cultural influences, the addition of Islamic theologians and political theorists to society, and the general Islamization of Hausa culture in the 17th and 18th centuries. By the time the 19th century rolled around, Islam had become the central tenet of Hausaland, due to the emergence of the charismatic, Fulani scholar, religious teacher, revolutionary, military leader, writer, and promoter of Sunni Islam, Shehu Usman Danfodio, 1754 to 1817. Danfodio was the founder of the Sokoto Caliphate, which came into being in 1804, during the Fulani War Jihad, that was administered using Sunni Islam. Sunni Islam is one of the 2 main branches of Islam, and it is followed by the majority of Muslims across the world. Danfodio's jihad had the effect of igniting the consolidation of Islam throughout Hausaland in the 19th century, as the region became part of the Sokoto Caliphate. Islam, Sunni. Approximately 85% to 90% of the world's Muslims subscribe to the branch of Islam known as Sunni. Considered by most scholars to be moderate and orthodox, it is also the main religion found in Hausaland. The word Sunni dates from the 17th century and is said to refer to adherents of the Sunnah, that is, Muslims who accept the orthodox tradition and the Quran, known in Arabic as the Al-As-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah, or the people of the Sunnah and the community. The word Sunnah means the behavior and traditional teachings of Muhammad's actions. The foundation of Sunni Islam is threefold. First and most importantly, the Quran, which is the sacred scripture of Islam that was revealed by the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad in the West Arabian towns Mecca and Medina, beginning in 610 and ending with Muhammad's death in 632. Second, the Hadith, which are a record of the traditions or sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, revered and received as the major source of religious law and moral guidance, second only to the authority of the Quran. Third, the Ijma, which is the historical consensus or agreement of Islamic scholars on points of Islamic law. The consensus can also be justified through sayings from the Hadith. An example of a Hadith. I heard the Messenger of Allah say, Allah the Almighty said, O son of Adam, so long as you call upon me and ask of me, I shall forgive you for what you have done, and I shall not mind. O son of Adam, were your sins to reach the clouds of the sky, and were you then to ask forgiveness of me, I would forgive you. O son of Adam, were you then to come to me with sins nearly as great as the earth, and were you then to face me, ascribing no partner to me, I would bring you forgiveness. Shia, approximately 10% to 13% of the world's Muslims, subscribe to the branch of Islam known as Shia. The word Shia dates from the 17th century and is said to refer to those who recognize Ali ibn Abi Talib, a cousin, son-in-law, and companion of the Prophet Muhammad, as his rightful successor, following the Prophet's death. This is in marked contrast to the Sunni, who recognize Abu Bakr Abdullah ibn Uthman, the father-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, as his rightful successor, due to his political and administrative powers within the community at the time. In Arabic, the full-length description of this branch of Islam is Shi'at Ali, which means the party of Ali. There are 5 key principles within Shia Islam, also referred to as the 5 roots of Usul ad-Din, or Shia Islam. Tawhid. This is the belief that God is one, He is almighty, and only He is worthy of worship. Adalat, or divine justice. Shia Muslims believe that Allah is always right and just. Sometimes Allah may act in ways that are beyond our understanding, but ultimately, the world has been created to be fair and just. All Muslims believe there will be a day of judgment, when they will have to account for their faith and deeds. Nubuwah, or the prophets. The prophets provide guidance from God and should be respected. This is especially so for Prophet Muhammad, as he was God's final prophet and communicated the Quran to human beings. Imamate, or authority of the Imams. The 12 Imams were chosen by God to lead Islam after Muhammad. Shia Muslims believe that leaders such as Imams protect the religion and help to guide Muslims along the right path. Al-Ma'ad, or Day of Resurrection. Muslims will be resurrected and judged by God. Despite the predominant presence of the Sunni in Hausaland, there remains a healthy number of Shia Muslims spread out among the northern states. It is difficult to estimate their precise percentage due to an absence of formal statistics. It has been argued that Shia Islam was introduced to Nigeria in the 1980s by a fiery cleric by the name of Ibrahim Yaqub el-Zakzaki, who founded the Islamic movement of Nigeria in the late 1970s. At birth originally a Sunni, Ibrahim Yaqub el-Zakzaki was inspired by the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran and called for a similar overthrow of the Nigerian government and complete institution of Islamic law. He identified himself as a Shia Muslim in one of his many popular cassette sermons that circulated around northern Nigeria in the 1980s and 1990s. He was imprisoned numerous times throughout this period for his seditious speech and calls for revolution. As a result of the difference between Sunni and Shia Islam, the former has a far greater number of accepted hadiths than the latter. This can clearly be ascribed to the fact that the Shia do not recognize the caliphs or leaders in the Muslim community who were established under Sunni. In order to address crucial issues such as prayer and marriage, the Shia will often refer to the authority of the Imams. Sufism. Approximately 5% of the world's Muslims follow Sufism, also known as Tasawwuf, in the Arabic-speaking world. The word Sufi is of Arabic origin. It translates to the phrase man of wool, and it is thought to refer to the assumption of holy garments in order to immerse oneself in mysticism. Sufism, or in Arabic, Tasawwuf, is an umbrella term which refers to the inner mystical dimension of Islam. The same linguistic root also generates from the word for wool in Arabic. Hence, a Sufi is one who wears a wool or suf garment. This refers to the practice of some ascetic mystics who would wear a simple wool garment. Mystics were among the Prophet's companions and the earliest Muslims before Orthodox Islam was established. They supported an inner path which harmonized inner spiritual life while also maintaining religious codes for daily life. For Sufis, the universe, with all of its seemingly complex entities, forms a unified whole, bound together by love. The messages of Sufi thinkers reflect the universal and inclusive nature of Sufism. A famous Sufi mystic and scholar known as Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, 1207 to 1273, or more simply Rumi, has occupied a permanent place in the ancient and modern world through his works, and more particularly his intricate poetry. Many fans of his work may be wholly unaware that they have been introduced through his works to the Sufi approach to life. The universe, with all of its seemingly complex entities, forms a unified whole, bound together by love. An example of one of Rumi's deceptively simple poems: "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment, for cleverness is mere opinion, and bewilderment is vision." Islamic mysticism is often referred to as the internalization and intensification of Islamic faith and practice. Sufis strive to constantly be aware of God's presence, stressing contemplation over action, spiritual development over legalism, and cultivation of the soul over social interaction. In contrast to the academic exercises of theology and jurisprudence, which depend on reason, Sufism depends on emotion and imagination in the divine human relationship. Sufism is unrelated to the Sunni Shia split, schools of jurisprudence, social class, gender, geography, or family connections. It is closely associated with both popular religion and orthodox expressions of Islamic teachings. It has been both opposed and supported by the state. Within Sufism, there are a number of tariqah, or ways, for a Muslim to follow to attain a personal religious experience. The word tariqah can be loosely translated to the English terms order or brotherhood, even though the actual meaning is much broader than this. It can also refer to the infrastructure put in place to support the ways. Thus, we will find that it is possible to have tariqah ways without tariqah brotherhoods, but it is impossible to have tariqah brotherhoods without tariqah ways. The number of Sufi brotherhoods is incredibly varied within Islam and across the world. Hausaland is home to two prominent Sufi brotherhoods, known as the Qadariyya and Tijaniyya. The Qadariyya tariqah derive their name from Abd al-Qadir al-Jilani, circa 1077 to 1166, a Sufi teacher and founder of a Hanbali college for Islamic introduction, or a madrasa, and a religious hostel. The Tijaniyya tariqah derive their name from Ahmad at-Tijani, 1737 to 1815, an Algerian Berber and Sufi scholar who was educated and died in Fez, Morocco. Both brotherhoods have been in good standing within northern Nigeria and remain so. The widespread respect they have come to command has developed over the past 2 centuries and is at least in part rooted in their links to the Sokoto Caliphate. These ties give the Qadariyya and Tijaniyya a legitimacy that is at once local and international, historic and contemporary, religious and political. For although the Caliphate is now not what it used to be, it still has substance, and its leaders, the Sultan and various emirs, continue to exert enormous influence. Salafism. Less than 1% of the world's Muslims follow Salafism, also known as the Salafiyya movement, which is a conservative branch within Sunni Islam. The word Salafi is derived from the Arabic word Salaf. Salaf means pious predecessor or forefather, or al-Salaf al-Salil, and it is often equated to the first 3 generations of Muslims. This reference to 3 generations is based on a well-known hadith from the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet said, "The best people are those of my generation, and then those who will come after them, the next generation, and then those who will come after them, i.e., the next generation, and then after them. There will come people whose witness will precede their oaths, and whose oaths will precede their witness." This hadith forms the basis for the understanding that the Salaf, believed to include Muhammad himself, the Sahaba, or companions, the Tabi'un, or followers, and the Tabi'al Tabi'in, or followers of the followers, knew the unadulterated, pure form of Islam. It is the strident belief in this purity that has led to the introduction, rise, and entrenchment of Boko Haram in northern Nigeria, to the dismay of traditional and mainstream Nigerian Salafists, some of whom insist that Boko Haram's specific ideology and actions are not accepted within Sunni Islam. Internationally, the jihadist sect Boko Haram has become the most famous manifestation of Salafism in Nigeria. Yet, Boko Haram is merely a fringe offshoot of a much larger Salafi movement in the northern part of the country. Mainstream Nigerian Salafis often use strident and confrontational rhetoric toward other Muslims and toward Nigerian Christians, but they are not jihadists. Mainstream Salafis do not generally engage in violence. They do not advocate the overthrow of the secular state, and they do not reject Western-style educational institutions. Mainstream Nigerian Salafis often use strident and confrontational rhetoric toward other Muslims and toward Nigerian Christians, but they are not jihadists. Mainstream Salafis do not generally engage in violence. They do not advocate the overthrow of the secular state, and they do not reject Western-style educational institutions. It is believed that Salafism found its foothold in Nigeria with the establishment of the University of Medina in 1961 and the enrollment of Nigerian students into the institution, which began in 1980. Medinan students such as Sheikh Mahmoud Adam, Sani Umar Rajia Lemo, Sheikh Abdul Wahab Abdullah, Bashir Aliyu Umar, and a host of others, primarily in Kano, Nigeria, had a massive impact on the settlement of the Salafism in Nigeria. Similar to the other branches of Islam, there are sub-branches leading to other sub-branches, resulting in internal and external conflicts within Salafism that are likely to continue. The beauty of Islam is that it allows for a diversity of opinions, which tend to be clustered around several immovable tenets. Ahmadiyya. Approximately 0.62% to 1.25% of the world's Muslims subscribe to the branch of Islam known as Ahmadiyya. The word Ahmadiyya means fellowship or followers of Ahmad, which is another name of Muhammad in the Quran. The Ahmadiyya movement was founded by an Indian religious leader by the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, 1835 to 1908, with essential teachings of sanctity of life, love, peace, and justice. It is commonly held to have begun in Lagos in 1916, but after this, its origin story splinters into several paths. It is officially known as the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, or Al-Jama'ah Al-Islamiyya Al-Ahmadiyya. Ahmadi adherents tend to be found in high numbers in western Nigeria, Lagos in particular, but they also have a strong presence in Hausaland, despite a certain amount of controversy surrounding several of their beliefs. It has been alleged that they do not believe in the key doctrine of the finality of prophecy, in which the Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet, but they strenuously deny this claim, arguing they share the belief that Muhammad was the last law-bearing prophet, but consider their own founder, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, as a subordinate prophet who came after him. They argue that in this respect, they are no different to other Muslims who are awaiting the coming into the world of the Prophet Jesus. Ahmadiyya Muslims also believe that Ahmad is both the promised Mahdi in Islam and the Messiah, and that Jesus lived and is buried in Kashmir. Their view on jihad is also very different from Islamists. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad believes that the military use of jihad is no longer needed in the present age, and all violent actions do not have justification in the name of jihad. Quranism. It is not currently known how many of the world's Muslims identify as Quranists, also known as Qiraniyun or Al-Quraniya. Their strict belief is that all Islamic guidance, guidelines, and law should flow only from the Quran. This means that other sources of religious authority, such as the Hadiths and Sunnah, are not recognized as valid, because the Quran is all that is required to live one's life as a devout Muslim. Stories relating the words and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad, known as Hadith in Arabic, have long been esteemed by the vast majority of Muslims as a source of law and guidance, second only to the Quran in authority. In recent years, an increasingly vocal Muslim opposition to Hadith insists that the Quran alone should be the sole source of religious law and guidance in Islam. Rashad Khalifa, Qasim Ahmad, Edip Yüksel, and Ahmad Subi Mansour are among the most important rejectors of the Hadith, whose arguments influence a wide variety of groups popularly labeled Al-Quran, Quraniyun, or Quranists. There are two strains of opposition to the authority of the Hadith. The first is opposition to an extra Quranic source of scriptural authority, and the second is to the problematic content of some of the Hadith that make the religion an object of ridicule. Authenticity is also a concern. and opponents of the Hadith often argue that the Hadith have nothing to do with the Prophet. However, the overriding concern is about granting scriptural authority to something other than the Quran. In Hausaland, Quranism has appeared in one form as the Kalakato movement. The phrase Kalakato means man says in the Hausa language and refers to the sayings and teachings of Prophet Muhammad that are rejected by the adherents to these beliefs. Following the teachings of Malam Muhammadu Marwa Matatsine, Kalakato rejects the Hadiths and Sunnah, which are the sayings and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, considered by most Muslims to be integral parts of Islamic belief and jurisprudence, along with the Quran. The Quran is the only book Kalakato followers are allowed to read. The movement considers everyone who fails to follow their unorthodox beliefs an infidel. The movement's inspiration is Malam Muhammad, Marwa Metatsine, Hausa for he who curses others, a Cameroonian preacher who relocated to Nigeria's Kano state. Metatsine forbade his followers from using automobiles, bicycles, watches, radios, and from possessing any more than the absolute minimum amount of money needed to survive. However, not all Quranists are members of the Kalakato movement. Some are ordinary Muslims who simply quietly believe that the message contained in the Quran is both perfect and complete, and covers all aspects of Islam without needing to consult any supplementary documents. It continues to be a source of contention among Muslim scholars who maintain that hadiths are essential to give a practical form to the abstract Islamic concepts around which their day-to-day lives are based. Non-denominational Muslims, or just Muslims, as they are often colloquially referred to, do not consider themselves to be affiliated with any of the known Islamic branches or schools of thoughts, while observing the general rules and requirements of Islam. Due to the nature of the religion, it is not currently known how many Muslims across the world identify as non-denominational, but it is estimated that at least 1 in 5 Muslims in at least 22 countries identifies as non-denominational. It is even more difficult to attempt to reach an approximate number of Muslims in Hausaland who choose to fall under the non-denominational umbrella. While the stigma may not be the same as a person calling themselves an atheist, humanist, or secularist, it is easy to imagine the reaction of the average Nigerian to a Hausa person living in Hausaland who says they do not see themselves as Sunni, Shia, or any of the other popular or unpopular movements. It is understandable why a Muslim would want to avoid the conflict between various movements and branches in order to focus on what they consider to be the purity of the core concept of Islam by following the established religious texts, observing the 5 pillars, and living a pious and just life by doing good in their community, family, and among friends. Christianity. As of 2020, Christianity remains the largest religion in the world, so it is no surprise that it will have its followers in Islam's heartland. Nigeria has always been a melting pot of ethnicities, tribes, and religions, and the tolerance shown to different faiths is a key part of our intra-communal harmony, or disharmony as the case may be. The introduction of Christianity to northern Nigeria dates all the way back to the 17th century. Missionary interest and propaganda in northern Nigeria may have begun before the 18th century. By 1708, it is recorded, there were not less than 100,000 Christian adherents in the kingdom of Kororofa, and a 60-bed hospital had been built by the Roman Catholic priests. About this time, too, Rome attempted to introduce Christianity into Borno, and one Father Carlo de Genova was appointed prefect of the projected mission. Indeed, in the second half of the 19th century, no part of the Beled es Sudan received as much attention from the Christian missionary world as northern Nigeria. In this period, not less than 7 Christian bodies in Britain, the United States, Canada, and Italy expressed a desire to begin work in the territory. In present-day Hausaland, Christianity's presence is embedded in the form of churches, missions, and organizations, such as the Hausa Christians Foundation, which focuses on delivering assistance in the 5 areas of Christian missions, education and empowerment programs, health and human services, advocacy, and media. The pre-existing challenges connected to data collection rear their ugly heads once again, as it is not known how many Hausa Christians reside in Hausaland. Unsurprisingly, there have been tense periodic clashes over the decades between Christians and Muslims, due in part to the eagerness of Muslim politicians to extend Sharia law into secular penal codes under the guise of democracy and federalism. Sharia is a religious law that forms part of the Islamic tradition that has been incorporated into the main bodies of civil and criminal law of 12 northern Nigerian states since 1999. The conflict has stemmed from the strict interpretation of its principles and the harsh penalties for what it considers to be serious and unforgivable crimes. The reintroduction of Islamic criminal law has contributed to interreligious tensions in Nigeria, in particular in the early years of adoption. The impact of this expansion of a religious-based legal system on non-Muslims in particular has been a consistent question. In the year 2000, USCIRF commissioners wrote to then-President Clinton expressing concern over a wave of violence between Christians and Muslims during recent months, fostered by the attempts of several northern Nigerian states to adopt Islamic criminal law and impose it on non-Muslims. Fortunately, this concern has abated over the years, since non-Muslims cannot be taken to Sharia courts without their consent. Sharia law has been practiced for centuries among the Muslims of northern Nigeria. After independence in 1960, Sharia had been limited to personal law. Thus, for many Muslims, the reintroduction of Sharia penal and criminal procedure codes did not mark a grand shift. Rather, it reflected the greater cultural norm. Moreover, it was welcomed by many in the region as an alternative to a conventional court and justice system that is perceived as corrupt, expensive, biased, and inefficient. Since the 20th century, Christianity has been embraced in Hausaland due to three significant factors: the institutionalization of British colonial rule, the establishment of non-Muslim settlements, and robust evangelism carried out by multiple Christian missionaries. However, it must be noted that despite this evangelism, Christianity remains a minority religion in northern Nigeria. Traditional religion, Maguzanchi. Maguzanchi is an African traditional religion that predates Islam and has worshippers in certain parts of the world, such as Arabia. The estimated number of present-day believers is unknown, particularly as a large proportion converted to Islam following Danfodio's jihad in the 18th century. The religion can also be identified as Hausa animism due to the integral nature of animals in rituals and celebrations. The presence of Maguzanchi in Hausaland can be traced to a Hausa tribe called the Maguzawa, said to be the original inhabitants of Kano and descendants of Maguji, who was one of the 11 pre-jihadic pagan chiefs who led the clans of Kano. The Maguzawa spirit world is centered around the concept of a supreme being called Ubangiji, or God, who lives in the sky and is not an object of direct worship, having no sacrifices, liturgy, priests, nor shrines, alongside the veneration of deities and ancestors. He is also referred to as Ibangiji, Iyayengiji, or Lord of Lords, May Ikoduka, or the Almighty, May Tsarki, or the Holy One, and May Sama, the owner of heaven. The word Maguzawa is derived from an interesting mix of the Arabic words for idolatre and magus, or pagan, and it neatly captures the indigenous nature of their religion. Pre-Islamic Hausa religion is believed to have survived in some beliefs and practices among groups usually referred to as Azna in Niger and Maguzawa in Nigeria. Today, these names have acquired derogatory connotations. Hausa speakers rarely self-identify as Azna, and non-Islamic religious practices and beliefs have been increasingly considered incompatible with Islam. While they have not died out entirely, they are practiced discreetly. This traditional religion is centered around supernatural forces, spirit possession, spirit worship, and magic. Two key aspects of Maguzanchi are belief in the existence of iskoki, or spirits, and Bori, or spirit possession. Interestingly, both of these concepts have been assimilated into Islam as a way of making conversion a more attractive prospect to those who have not yet embraced it. Similarly, in Islam, there is a belief in the spirit world, the Islamic Midan, jinn in Arabic. This Islamic religious belief corresponds to the Eskoki, or spirits cult, in Maguzanchi, providing a point of synthesis for the two separate religious beliefs, the spirit cult in Maguzanchi and the jinn in Islam. As a result, Islam, instead of rejecting the Hausa belief in Iskoki and Bori cult, embraced it and gave it a different meaning. This further explains how and why the Maguzawa, that is, the indigenous Hausa-speaking tribe of Kanu, later began to freely use the Arabic word jinn as a synonym for iska, which is the Hausa singular for spirit, and the continued practice among Hausa Muslims of the Bori cult. Bori. Bori is a Hausa common noun, meaning a sacred and occult force which resides in matter. The word itself shares the same roots as the Hausa word borasa, which now means distilled spirits, as opposed to the native palm wine and other similar drinks. By allowing themselves to be deliberately possessed by chosen spirits during ritual dances and seasonal festivals, the followers of what is commonly referred to as a cult commune with supernatural forces, leading to positive and negative outcomes. Among the Maguzawa, or Hausa pagans, it is a chief who presides at the dances and sacrifices to the deities. It is only in the large towns that their cult has got into the hands of professional Bori men and women who not only direct the dances, but in many cases make quite good income by foretelling the success or otherwise of mercantile ventures, aiding in love troubles, etc. A few examples of the spirits worshipped by the Hausa include Dogondaji, or tall one of the forest, Sarkin Rafi, or chief of the river, Kure, or hyena, and Gajimare, or god of rain and storm. According to Dr. Umar Danfulani, the survival of the Bori cult is a way of immortalizing Maguzanchi. In fact, he regards Bori as a part of Maguzanchi, which survives as an island within the Ocean of Islam in northern Nigeria. Its survival can be attributed to a number of factors, among them the feminine nature of the cult, its control and domination by women, and its provision of freedom for women, unequaled by both Islam and Christianity. Furthermore, Bori provides an avenue for sociocultural performance, festivals, and other types of interaction, and offers traditional medical and healthcare services to the public, factors that have endeared the cult to both members and non-members. Women are honored and entrusted with a significant amount of power in the Bori cult. In fact, they occupy high ritual and social positions, and most Bori adherents are women. The most important role tends to be held by a woman who becomes known as a Magajiya, or queen, who works closely alongside her male counterpart, known as an Ajingi, and they both perform or delegate all ritual functions, including sacrifices, and preside over the Saruniya, queen, and the Sarkinyan Bori, or Andi, king of Bori members. Bori is an integral part of Maguzanchi. From its earliest belief in Babaku, pagan spirits prone to mischief and evil-doing, to the introduction of Fafaru, Muslim spirits who piously follow Islamic rituals and rites under the guidance of Allah, when Islam came to Hausaland accompanied by international and local cultural influences. Soldier spirits reflect totem spirits, famous hunters and warlords, while Fulani spirits mirror the advent of Fulani contact with the Hausa. The presence of European spirits in the Bori cult reflects the pre-colonial and colonial epochs, a time when Europeans were in contact with Hausaland. The introduction of spirits from other ethnic groups in Nigeria into the cult merely mirror the interaction between Hausa and other ethnic groups in Nigeria. Thus, the history of the Bori cult reveals layers and historical epochs of Maguzawa contact with other peoples and cultures within their environment. Thus, it may be seen that prior to the arrival and establishment of Islam, Bori played and continues to play an important part in the daily lives of the Hausa people, particularly through the use of traditional healing practices, divination, and the preservation of morals and values. The religion understandably remains untouched in more remote areas of Hausaland, with enthusiasm, outright or otherwise, waning as one approaches the urbanized city centers. It must be mentioned that support for Bori can often be found among established Muslim leaders such as emirs and noblemen who offer money and some presents to Bori cult members in order to obtain local medications, protective, productive, and destructive charms, amulets and talismans, referred to in Hausa as guru and liar.